Omi lived in a village called Umo. She was very pretty and all the boys wanted to date her. But she turned them all down. Omi was an orphan. She didn't know her dad. And her mom passed away a few years ago. Though she was all alone, she was a strong and confident woman. One day Jude and his 3 friends approached her on the way from the stream. Jude was a very rude and spoiled child. His family was the richest in that village and he was an only child. He was used to getting everything he wanted. So when Omi turned Jude down, he was so embarrassed and he wanted to deal with her. After a week of planning, Jude and his friends waited for Omi. On the road from the river, when she came they blocked her way and surrounded her. They checked to see that no one was around. When they confirmed that, they held her down. They assaulted her and left her for dead. As they got home the other boys began to panic. Jude was carefree. And he told them not to worry. From her bedroom the mother heard their voices. And she walked to them. When she entered they went quiet. She asked what the issue was, but she was met with silence. After much persuasion Jude told her. She pulled his ear and shouted at him. After the little scolding she asked for the exact location, so she could clean up their mess. She took some of her men and headed to the river's path. Omi lay on the dirt, her body barely clinging to life, her voice thin as a whisper. She tried to call for help. She saw a woman walking towards her. She recognized her as the mother of Jude, one of the boys who just assaulted her. Omi's eyes met hers, pleading, but the woman's gaze was cold and unfeeling. Pretty girls, the woman sneered, always think they are too good for everyone else. Your pride brought you here. Omi's heart cracked even more. The woman ordered her men to lift Omi's broken body and carry it to the riverbank. She was left lying in the mud, with just enough life to feel the icy river lapping at her ankles. The water was rising, and soon, the river would swallow her whole, carrying her away, erasing her as if she'd never been. The boys and their families would never have to answer for what they'd done. But as Omi lay there, darkness closing in, she felt something stronger than pain. Rage. Unyielding, powerful, righteous rage. In her final moment of strength, she thrust her fingers into the river and called out. Voice raw. For the God of the river, help me. Please, just give me one chance. One chance to make them pay. And then everything went black. When she woke, she wasn't in the mud anymore. She was lying on soft earth, beside the river, healed but somehow changed. Her body felt different. Her heart beat steady and fierce. As she looked up, a man was kneeling by her side. His eyes were the color of the river's depths, intense and knowing. He was beautiful in a way that made her heart stammer. A beauty that seemed both ancient and untamed. You called me, he said, his voice smooth and warm. I am Aram, god of these waters. And I have heard your wish. Omi looked up at him, bewildered and frightened. Am I dead? Aram smiled gently, shaking his head. No. I have given you back your life. But it's a life bound to the river. You wanted justice, Omi, and I can help you get it. There would be a price to pay. She nodded without hesitation. All she could feel was her anger. All she could see was the faces of those who had wronged her. Her life was no longer her own. It was a tool for revenge. And with Aram's power, she knew what she had to do. That night, Omi returned to the village, her steps as silent as the shadows. She went to the large house, when she passed the security at the gate. They didn't even acknowledge her, it was probably Aram's power. She touched the door. And it unlocked. As she walked in, she heard loud music coming from the parlor. The boys were laughing and drinking. Their cruelty already forgotten. They had no remorse, no guilt. They hadn't even given her a second thought. They didn't notice her at first. As she entered the party, standing in there, with eyes like storm clouds. When one of them finally saw her, he froze, his laughter dying on his lips. Soon, the others turned to look, their faces paling as they recognized her. "You, she said, voice steady and cold. "Did you think I would disappear so easily?" One of them stumbled backward, eyes wide with terror. Another tried to speak, his voice shaking as he stammered out, "Omi, please forgive me, I didn't want to do it, it was Jude's fault." They all started to cry and beg, but Omi saw through it. Their mother came downstairs and was shocked to see Omi. She saw the light coming out of her hands. And she also knelt down begging. Omi didn't care. She raised her hand, and with it, a dark wind swept through the room, locking the doors and sealing them all inside with her. Their pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears, as Omi made each one face the terror they had inflicted upon her. One by one, she confronted them, and one by one, she left them broken, their bodies as shattered as hers had been. Omi returned to the river, hands washed clean, but her heart still heavy, her vengeance complete. She knelt by the water's edge, staring into the river's depths, her reflection twisted with pain and sorrow. "Thank you, Aram," she whispered, the gratitude and love for him filling her with warmth. The water rippled, and Aram emerged, his gaze full of both pride and sadness. "Your vengeance is complete," he said gently. Omi felt a pang in her chest, but it was softened by the sight of him. She started to cry, and felt his hand run over her head, comforting her. Over the days that followed, she found herself returning to the river each night, finding comfort in Aram's presence, their bond deepening with each visit. Gradually, the darkness that had filled her heart after her ordeal began to heal, replaced with something she'd never thought she'd feel again: love. In Aram's embrace, Omi found peace and purpose. Every night she would come to the river and call out to him. When he came, they would sit at the riverbed and talk. She shared everything and anything with him. Aram was a man of few words, he spoke little, and even less when she asked for details about his world. After asking so many times, she let it go, just grateful for spending time with him. One evening, 3 months after the incident, under the cover of twilight, Aram held her close, confessing in a soft whisper, "Omi, I want to be with you. Truly. Beyond this river's curse," Omi replied. "Then let's be together, let's go away." His eyes turned sad. "I can't." Why, she asked. He put on a smile and kissed her. She felt repose down her spine. Slowly he began to kiss her body, caressing her nipples. Omi felt her body burn with desire. He kissed her and began to take off her clothes, but he stopped. Omi looked up, her body burning hot. He smiled at her lovingly. "Are you sure you want this?" "Yes," she said, her voice thick with desire. That was all he needed to hear. He stripped her and covered her body with his warmth. Omi screamed in intense pleasure. After that, they began to spend more time with each other. But things started to change. Aram seemed troubled, evasive, his gaze constantly flicking toward the river, as though fearing what lay beneath. When Omi asked, he'd only smile and reassure her. brushing it off. But as the days passed, her suspicion grew stronger. One night, when she arrived at the river, she called as usual. But Aaron was nowhere to be found. The water was silent and still. A chill crept over her, and she called his name again, her voice carrying into the night. But the only answer was silence, until she saw a flicker of movement beneath the water's surface. Slowly, a figure rose from the depths, his face unfamiliar and wicked yet eerily knowing. "Looking for my servant, are you?" the figure asked, a smirk spreading across his face. "You're the one Aaron has been fooling around with." His voice was dark, mocking, with a venom that sent shivers down her spine. Omi took a step back, heart pounding. "Who are you?" "I am the god of this river," he sneered. "Aaron is my creation. Nothing more than a shadow I bound to these waters. He is here to serve me. And me alone." "No, he would have told me. He loves me," she stammered, struggling to understand. "Love?" The god laughed coldly. "Aaron has no freedom to love. No choice at all. He's mine, and soon you will be too. Did you really think a mere mortal could bind herself to me without consequence? You called on this river for revenge. And now, both you and Aaron belong to me." Her heart sank, the weight of betrayal and horror settling in. "Aaron," she cried, calling out to him in desperation. "Aaron, please, tell me it's not true." The water shimmered. And finally, Aaron appeared, his expression filled with sorrow as he looked at her. "Chained in spirit to this dark god. It wasn't supposed to happen this way," he said softly, voice trembling with regret. "But you must believe me, Omi. What I feel for you is real. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I was afraid." Omi's heart shattered, tears in her eyes. He looked away. "I was trapped." She turned to the god, a fire blazing in her eyes. "I don't belong to you. You can't have us." The god laughed, a cold, merciless sound. "You've already given yourself over to this river's power. There's nothing you can do." But then, something unexpected happened. Aaron turned to Omi, his eyes full of fierce determination. "We may be bound to this river, Omi," he said, his voice strong and steady. "But not to him." The god's face twisted in fury, and he raised his hand, summoning the river's power to bind Omi. But in that moment, Aaron took the opportunity to pull the necklace around the god's neck. The necklace was his power. He screamed in pain as Aaron began to chant, channeling energy from the river directly. And the necklace he held. He begged the river to give him a chance at love and free him from the shackles of the wicked god. As he spoke, the river began to shimmer, a soft, ethereal light rising around them. The river had accepted their plea. "No!" the god screamed, his voice thundering through the night. "This can't be." Omi and Aaron stood together, their love defying the god's power. With each passing second, the chains around Aaron weakened, dissolving in the face of their bond. In one final act of defiance, Aaron called upon the power of the river again, drawing on centuries of magic to break the chains that bound him. With a final burst of light, the god's hold shattered, and he was banished back into the depths of the river, his cries fading into silence. Aaron and Omi stood together, free at last, their love stronger than any curse. Aaron looked down at her, a tear slipping down his cheek as he realized they were truly free. "Omi, we can leave this place," together. He kissed her. I am really sorry. I shouldn't have deceived you. I forgive you, she replied. She smiled. Tears of joy filling her eyes. And they stepped away from the river and held each other for what seemed like eternity. The end.